there's going to be what's called a startup crawl. Are you familiar with the term pub crawl? It's sort of the same thing. In fact, there's a lot of alcohol involved. I learned last year. Although I'm not sure we're all going to be able to serve alcohol, but I'm looking into it. So on March 8th, what's that?
Dog duck.
Oh, the dog and duck. They serve more than dog and duck there. So on March 8th, this startup crawl there'll be buses taking people around startups in Austin, and we're going to be, that is the 7th floor, is going to be a stop on that crawl from 4 till 10 on the 8th. And this is not required. It's not in the grading matrix. It's an opportunity for you all, if you want to get some practice receiving interested investors, people looking for a job. And there were 2,000 people in the crawl last year, so I suppose it'll be bigger this year. I'm not sure. Of course, we're not sure how many of them are going to come this far north, so that's part of our experiment. Any questions about that? March 8th? Yes.
So I've never been to something like this before. How can it help us start up in terms of promotion or something? Like, can we expect a lot of people who come there to use, like, try our product?
Oh, customers? I wouldn't think that would be the principal purpose of the event. I don't think it would be to meet them, although you never know. It would be other startup people, investors, venture capitalists. There's a lot of them. There are over 400 registered for South by now. We don't know how many of them are going to be there on the 8th, though. So there's a lot of not known about this. It's a normal expo kind of thing. You don't really know what's going to happen. But the fact that it was so successful last year is evidence that it'll be even more successful for South by is on this kind of arc. So it'll be a good opportunity to experiment with telling your story to people. And if you're recruiting, meeting some people who might be looking for a job. I noticed a lot of that went on last year. Okay, and so, and I mentioned venture capitalists might be there. So, and Josh isn't here, I'll mention there'll probably be some angels too. All right. Are any of you interested in your startups in raising money at some point? Anyone raise your hand? And do you think you would consider venture capitalists, or has Josh completely twisted you into thinking that only angels are the correct way to go? How many would be interested in venture capitalists? So we are very fortunate this evening to have one of my closest friends who happened to wander into town today, and I got him to come. And this is Steve Coit. And Steve is a venture capitalist. No, was a venture capitalist. He won't let me tell you what he is now. But he was a venture capitalist for many, many years at at two of the premier VC firms. And I've asked him to come and talk about raising money with venture capitalists. And so, with no further ado, Steve Coit.
Thank you. It's getting late, it won't take long, but I think the advantage I have is I'm not a venture capitalist, and none of you are approaching me for money. And so we can have a good discussion about venture capital that's uncluttered by other agendas. Because most of the time, discussions with venture capitalists can be confusing, and venture capitalists are very persuasive people. You people are very persuasive, and so you have a meeting of mutual persuasion where reality can sometimes float away. There are many financing alternatives you can use, and when I used to talk to entrepreneurs, at least in Silicon Valley when I worked there, venture capital was the first thing they thought of. But the truth is, there are many ways to finance your business, and many of you have discovered ways to finance your business, whether you are deliberate in that process or not. I mean, Bob mentioned angels. That's a widely popular, very visible way to finance your business. People use family and friends. That can be trouble. People can use grants, SBA grants, and NIH grants, and other kinds of grants. I remember many companies in Silicon Valley got Defense Department grants. Bank loans, credit cards, these are all questionable ideas, but how do you sort through how you finance your company? And I want to talk in particular about how you, whether you decide you're a good candidate for venture capital. And it's an imprecise business, but I remember after meeting with some owners thinking of this grid. This grid is this is the amount of money your business is going to need, beginning to end, to make it to cash break even. How much financing do you really need? And you might need $100, might need $2 million, might need $10 million, might need $100 million, maybe $5 billion, who knows? And this is the amount of time you're going to need it. You might need it for a month or a few weeks. You might need it in a year. You might need it for 5 years. You might need it for 15 years. You might need it for, I'm going to keep going, you might need it for 50 years or maybe forever. Maybe you can never pay it back. It happens. And by the way, realizing that can change your financing strategy. Most biotech companies realize they actually are never going to ever turn profitable if they consider the drug consumer their customer. If they consider drug companies their customer, it's a different matter. So the question is, where is your business in this? And I'm not saying you can know with precision. Most entrepreneurs vastly underestimate how much money it's going to take to grow their business. But the better you are at that, the better you're going to be at financing your business and the better entrepreneur you're going to be. If you're really realistic of how much money it's really going to take before you start, but when you reach that cash break even, and you can pay back. The venture capitalists. Well, actually, before I talk about venture capital, let me talk about some examples here to give you a way this works. You know, if you need money for about a year and you need something in here, I think family and friends sort of work. You don't need it for very much time and you don't need very much money. If you need a little more money, and you still can pay it back quick, sometimes a bank is a better idea. Maybe. The grant side of things is up here. Because grants don't have to be paid back. And venture capital. Oh, by the way, here, I decided there's one here. I'm going to call it. This is forgetful family and friends.
How about dead family?
Venture capital doesn't cover much of this grid, and that's the issue. Venture capital, the funds are put together. And this has to do with the contracts that venture capitalists have with their investors. For those of you who don't know, venture capitalists raise money from outside investors and invest it, and then get carried interest in profits, typically a management fee, but have to pay back that fund. And most funds have a lifespan of about 10 years, but you really need to have the return in maybe a 3 to 7 year time frame. And if you really don't think you can achieve that, then venture capital is not a good alternative, because you're going to have board meeting fights on the upper end here. And if you're below this, it's not clear venture capital is necessarily the right choice for you, because it's pretty expensive. Venture capital funds, and this has changed some, but venture capital funds also have a bracket of how much they like to put at work this is bracketed by time and amount, but also the return. Venture capitalists expect returns. I remember in the 80s, we used to look for a 20x return for something we really want to pay attention to. I think that's dropped now. And I think 10x, maybe 5x even. I was reading recently about a venture capital fund growing about a return they got 5 times their money. But that strikes me as a tough way for a fund to pay off if you're going to do risky deals. The 20 times return really means that of, say, a portfolio of 30 companies, 2 or 3, you're great if 3 make it. You keep going, 1 makes it. If none get 20 times return, you're probably going to have trouble with your investors. But you got to pay for the 17 that don't make it. So how do you make these returns? And something that I think it gets lost, and I don't know whether you've ever heard this talking to venture capitalists, but to do that, you have to do something that Gary talked about. You have to have a growth path that is credible. And it means you have to have a growth path to a pretty big market that either gets you acquired or an IPO. And you got to have a market value that is pretty big to earn this kind of thing, earn that kind of return. And the valuation you're talking about, $100, $200 million, $1 billion, means you have to be in a market that gives you revenues of that size. And if you're starting now, and this is the logic I'd ask you to see if you can buy, it means you are in a market that already exists. You may think you're pioneering a market, but almost always you're in a market that already exists, but they're buying something else. And for instance, advertising is really an old business. And any web business that is going to bet its revenue stream on advertising is really taking old money and getting it into a new product. And so the premise is that you have to be in a market. I used to say, if you don't have any competitor, you probably have no market. And I believe that. Somebody is spending money on something else now, and you're going to go and try to get them to do something different, but they're doing it today with another alternative. And your knowledge of what they're doing today with that other alternative, that predecessor technology, is really key, because you're going to try to persuade them to do something different. This brings up another thing I want to put here, because I think this is an important spread. I'm going to call this corporate development. If you're an entrepreneur inside a big, I don't know, have any of you worked for a big company and seen R&D projects that get killed because they get too expensive or take too long? So corporations have their box too. And it's related to what I just said, which is these corporations abandon technologies, give up on new ideas, because this evolutionary Darwinian development called venture capital sits there and preys on the ideas that are started here and the executives that are frustrated here that need more time and about the same amount of money, actually. And venture capital teams from the drug companies leave, and they're funded by venture capital. Teams from semiconductor companies leave, and they're funded by venture capital. And I know that venture capitalists, what venture capitalists dream of is a spin out of Intel or a spin out of Google, where Google has given up on something that was promising. And the team wants more time, more money, and venture capital wants them to do it. So venture capital is a license to lose money that you can't get in a big company. And it answers Gary's question, why do little companies beat up big companies? How can you take on a big company? Well, in our current system, every R&D dollar that goes toward a Gary project compensation package of the CEO, almost always, because he's losing money on these long-term developments. So he'll give it some amount of time, some amount of budget, but the impatience can run high here, especially if other products get in trouble. And so these are spin-off ideas and engineers and people and executives that go here. So if venture capital is a license to lose money, more money than your competitors, your ability to lose money is actually a competitive weapon that venture capitalists give you. But it's a drug that you better be careful with. Because if you lose money for the wrong reason and hire a bunch of people, you may not be able to shake off that habit, and you will stay in a loss position and disappoint your investors. So what do you do with that license to lose money that puts you at a competitive advantage? And I think that is the entrepreneur's art. I started to try to take notes thinking about talking to you today, and I said, you know, there's no one answer I can give you. I sure can tell you some mistakes, like hiring too many salespeople, or buying a lot of advertisement that has no long-term plan. You know, that's just squandering this license to lose. But I think I came up with one thing I'd like to talk about in an innovation center, which is if you're after big returns, if your business, and let me say, I'm not trying to talk you into a big return business. It's inherent in the idea you're choosing. Is it a big market? And if it is, then you need to find people who know that predecessor market very, very well and share your passion, share your insight, but have a sense of where the market is today in advance of your ability to supply it with this innovative product. And I think that one thing that is typically not done with the license to lose money is to hire really terrific, insightful people who know the market you're after. It's maybe an adjunct to what Gary said. Gary says educate yourself, and I couldn't agree more. Educate yourself with passion about your market, but also have a terrific taste for people who know more than you do, who walk in the door with the kind of learning he's talking about. And I always used to say the real test of your business plan, the best test, is she walks in the door, she has worked at an advertising agency, selling ads for an online service, and you have a better idea of delivering advertising services through websites. And she lives in New York, the company's based in Austin, she wants a big title, she wants a big salary, and the question is, can you convince her to move here? And I would always say, the test of your company is whether you can. And by the way, if you can't, you've got a problem. You have a problem with your market. Somebody who knows the market better than you do is not convinced. And to me, that's a better test than any venture capitalist turning it down. And by the way, you haven't spent a nickel doing it. You haven't sold a half your company. You haven't done anything. You've tried to hire somebody who knows something about the business you're trying to attack. And the other thing is that I used to hear, you might say, well, you know, she's going to change the company culture. And I would say, good. Because that's what you're hiring. And the ability to hire people the ability to attract terrific talent early with this war chest that you've been given at a high price, to me is one of the best ways to use the war chest, to build I'm not talking about massive hiring, I'm talking about hiring co-founders. Now that sometimes also used to rub people the wrong way. You know, we got 3 founders, we all love each other, we have a great culture, we all know what we want to do. Well, maybe typically, especially in incubator sites, it's very hard to find somebody who really knows the market at this site. So the co-founder you need to recruit dialogue with them. At least have a dialogue, meaningful dialogue. And I've seen contingent, like when we raise money, and you know, you don't have to move if they have no money. But I think attracting talent is really, really a key thing. So let me wrap up by saying that I think the key to thinking about venture capital is really a broader question, which is, I think you need to, electrical engineers here, yeah, a few, you need to impedance match. You need to impedance match your source of financing with the nature of your opportunity and how you use the money. And to me, that is the financing challenge. And if you get a mismatch, you've just made your life a lot harder. Any questions?
Yeah, I've actually had this question for a while. So if you have a relatively low-risk business model, and maybe you can have a 5 times return on it, is there any difference to you as a venture capitalist whether you'll take on that investment versus one that has a lot more risk but can get you like a 20 times or 30 times return?
The answer is that to get it depends a little bit on how much you're asking for. If you're asking for $100 million and I'm a certain kind of venture capital fund and you can give me $500 million, $400 million return, that might be a serious thing. But if you're asking for $10 and you're going to give me 50, that's low risk and it gets me 40, and that might make a family or friend happy. But it's the absolute amount of return that they really care about more than anything else. And to generate the things they really care about, it tends to be the big markets. And the big markets, which are really talking about, you can touch, feel, and taste the economic, I mean, I used to say it's new products chasing old dollars. New answers to old budgets. And so what you want to do is find people who know how those budgets are spent. And they're in big quantities if you're going to be in the venture capital business. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Gary?
If I got a hot idea and I got 2 or 3 venture capitalists interested in it, what questions should I ask or look for in picking the best partner?
I think that there are a few sort of tangible things and a few non-tangible things. There's a pecking order in venture capital, and the better funds are known, and the better funds typically deliver. It's just that simple. So you can find a top-tier firm, you know, if
They're going to deliver
Perkins,
what?
if Kleiner Perkins is interested in your fund, you have to pay attention to that. But beyond, they will demand a lot, and they will, you know, take you around the block with a lot of intervention. But usually their advice is the one thing I will say from my years in venture capitalists is their motivations are pretty clear. They want you to make a good return, and if that's why you want them there at the table to make a good return, you have a shared value there. And the better firms have better track records. I do think a couple of other less tangible things. One, people from the industry you're in really matter. If they have people who have done things like you're doing, it's a good thing. I used to, as a venture capitalist, I think one of the ways venture capitalists earn their stripes is by doing good due diligence on the entrepreneurs themselves. And we used to pride ourselves on how many people we could call, find out if this guy walked in the door and for them this and that. We would try to check them out every which way Sunday. And we would call people you gave us, we would call people you didn't give us, and we would find ways to find out about you that you don't even believe. And my view is, you do the same thing with other venture capitalists. Call people who worked at the companies that they were on the board of. Call people who worked with the entrepreneur. And find people to help you find out about the venture capitalists themselves. That's an intangible, but I think it's very real.
What would Kleiner Perkins deliver?
I think it's three things. One is they have industry ties that really help. They can hire, if Klein Perkins is helping you recruit her, it gets a lot easier. They're very good at that. Two, they have industry ties and connections within, used to talk about a Zaibatsu. They used to talk about the brother, sister, and cousin companies that are in the portfolio. That's pretty cool. And they have a bunch of executives. Sometimes they gave a list of people who've applied to jobs, and they'll help you hire. I think the real value of a top-tier firm, to me, was that if you've misguessed on this side of this graph, and you end up needing more money, and times are tough, the better firms have the resources and patience and experience to help you if you're north and west in trouble, north and east in trouble. And the reliability of investors is a very big deal. And the unproven investors who are being on short leash from their people, maybe inexperienced. Gary might get in trouble with my predecessor speaker, but there are a lot of former executives that end up in venture capital who try to run their portfolio companies like they run their companies. And I would be a little bit worried about that. You want people who've been out for a while, have a distance, who understand. I mean, I would always choose a venture capitalist who had a background. For instance, if you're doing something in semiconductors, I really like an engineer. I like a venture capitalist as an engineering background. I do. Or if you're doing something very innovative in system software that's going to give you a performance advantage or deep in communications, get somebody who's good technology. And likewise, if you're in biotech, I was always leery of venture capitalists who didn't really understand the medicine, the physiology, the chemistry behind what they were doing. But I think that the newer venture capitalists sometimes try to boss the company. They think that the company works for them, and I'm a little leery of that. I've seen that. And you don't want that. You want somebody who is a little more like an enthusiastic spectator, as opposed to a directed gallery guy.
Well, actually kind of leads into where I was
Yeah.
thinking, because kind of the last, I guess, 10 years, VC's got this rap of kind of thinking they're young, like getting too much control, a lot of insertion into the company. How, like, is that something that you talk about before you get into the contact with VC, or is that something that?
Well, it's certainly something you pick up in due diligence. And maybe what I'm also saying is I remember being told that it takes 5 years and $20 million to make a venture capitalist. He's got to lose it and spend the time. And so get somebody who's already going through that. One of the problems is that there was a run-up in the number of venture capitalists that came into business. And a lot of MBAs, and I have an MBA, but it was my undergraduate applied math and computer science background was so much more useful in venture capital than what I learned in MBA school. But I think the venture capital business became populated with financial types. And financial types play financial games. And for instance, I saw the invention of a or the popularization of financing interest that I think unfortunately has really become popular, and I'm very sad to see it. And let me see if any of you know what I'm talking about. And it's in the realm you're talking about. It's where I said to you that I'm going to give you $2 million at stock price $100 a share if you make your first year's milestone. But if you miss your first year's milestone, it's going to drop to $50 a share. And I'm going to earn twice what I would otherwise offer my money. And it's intended to say, okay, I'm doing it to make sure that you make that milestone, because it's just a terrible penalty in ownership and control if you miss your milestone. And somehow you don't deserve to run the company if you've missed your milestone, and therefore to be honest, to me, it's exactly what venture capital shouldn't be because I'm betting against you. I have an incentive to see you fail. And to me, I hate that. And frankly, I would hope, I think some venture, it used to be something that was never done, at least in Silicon Valley during the heyday, what I consider the heyday of venture capital, late 80s and early 90s. It seemed to have been invented by MBAs, and I don't think I like it. I'm not sure it speaks to the highly intervening, will impose on it. But I think the other problem is that I think it's pretty well known that returns in venture capital have dropped off. And I would say there's a cause and effect. I mean, the trick is to hire people who you want to leave alone. I worked for a great venture capitalist, and he heard that a partner at Mayfield had gone to run a company. And everybody said, oh, what a hero, this partner at Mayfield is going to go run this company. And my senior partner, a guy named Steve Merrill, said, why would I want to do that? That's a waste of time. You should be out looking for better deals. You shouldn't be stuck running a company. So, it's a different attitude.
When you're doing your diligence,
Yep.
what are you looking for? What do you want to hear about the people, and what do you not want to hear?
Gary was a good source of ideas on this one, which is the right motive is huge. I have a quicker answer on what I'm really not looking for. I always say, why are you doing this? Why are you doing, this is gonna drive you crazy. You're gonna, work all the time, terrible working conditions, work long hours. Why are you doing this? Why do I do this? And he said, well, I tried working at a bigger company and I want to do my own thing. I didn't like that answer. Because it said they didn't want to have a boss. And not wanting to have a boss is one of the worst reasons to be an individual. Because you will always have a boss. And if it's not your customer, hopefully it is, it's your board member or somebody else you're always. Maybe. Maybe, but I was talking about qualifications for entrepreneur or not.
Sorry, personal problems.
But I was really looking for somebody who really had a pure desire to succeed. And actually, it's something, I think it adds to what Garrett said. You can have a passion for idea A, and you can think you're really good at idea A, and you and our founders are in love with idea A, but somebody from New York comes to work for you, and you've talked to this person or this person too, and all the people that you've done with your due diligence have told you, A isn't the right idea. And you have to have the personal flexibility and the drive to succeed that says, I'm going to do B. And very, very many entrepreneurs have gone from A to B in the early phases that you're in right now, and I would urge you to. It's the opposite. It's the dark side of passion. You also have to have flexibility, and I would look for that flexibility. And frequently, and I've got to wrap up, but frequently, we with an entrepreneur would try to make them pass the swim test. We would work with them, introduce them to people, bounce ideas off them, introduce them to customers, go on customer visits with them, introduce potential recruits for about 6 months, as if we were board members, and just try to see if we like that person and that person likes us. And if they pass the swim test, and you get some positive affirmation, then we close it. Now, I'm not sure in today's heady venture capital times anybody gets that time, but the swim test was terrific, and maybe it's the ultimate answer to how you pick a venture capitalist. Is can you work with them over time before money's even exchanged? It's an interesting idea. Yes, sir.
Can I reveal what you do now?
Sure.
So, Steve is very accomplished, very wealthy, portrait painter. And I thought, well, that's a very nice thing. Then he got good at it, which was the surprise. And so Steve, his current commission, which I only sketched, Harvard University has lots of professors, and they get portraits painted of all the professors from time to time, especially the dead ones. And then they put them on all. What's that? They hold still. They hold still better, yeah. Steve's got basically the commission from Harvard to paint all of their professors. He took us on a tour last year of all the dormitories and dining halls